I greet you all for a solo episode of Depths of Gaming, episode 43. And we're not entirely sure what happened, but my personal theory is that a freak kielbasa sausage explosion wiped out half of Poland, and so now Jahith is currently fighting waves of sausage-based enemies that will progressively get more difficult as the night goes on, and for this he has our hopes and dreams. Get well soon, Jahith. So we will move straight on to the news. First and foremost, of course, yay! They announced the new DLC for Stellaris. Yes, we've been only talking about that ever since ever actually. It's just a giant string of always talking about Stellaris, but that's kind of the point. Those clever bastards. So, the important thing that they do say is that everything we've been talking about beforehand, that's going to be in the free patch, the cherry patch, because they know that it only pisses people off when they retroactively exclude stuff. So they're being really careful this time around. But it's kind of worth it, because they gave us the insubstantial stuff that was kind of important, but not really, but kind of, but not really, but kind of. And then they hit us with the whammy. And here's the whammy. We're finally going to get Titan-class ships. Now, this was kind of inevitable. In general, when something gets modded into the game enough, they will take steps towards making something like that happen. For instance, playable robots were kind of modded in almost immediately, but they finally, on their own, actually did it. This is true for a lot of the more minor features of the game as well. That's possibly why we've seen more civic diversity lately. That's possibly why we've seen more Ascension perk diversity lately, is because they want to add in what people are kind of wishing through effort, so to speak. And let's see here. So, this should have been obvious by the title, but planetary destructive weapons are going to be available. You're going to be able to mount them on Colossus-class ships, which will be unlocked with an assimilation perk. And it's sort of a extra technology path where you're able to research these super weapons, and apparently some of the special civic versions of some races are going to get super weapons. Like the assimilators are going to get a super weapon that allows them to instantly assimilate a planet with a single beam shot, which will be pretty interesting. Let's see here. The other funny Colossus weapon that you'll be able to start with is you're going to be like the Urquan. You can dome planets and then research them like primitives. That's kind of cool. And I forgot to mention, the Titan-class ships, there is both a Giant Pro and a Giant Con. The Giant Pro is they get a T-class weapon, which is even bigger than everything else, and I'm pretty sure like every other special slot weapon, you're going to have to research those individually. So we don't know whether or not it will start with the T-class weapon when you get Titans, but we will see. And there is a severe limit on how many you're able to field at once. It's 1 plus modifiers. So there's probably a way to get a decent number of them to form your own Super Titan battle unit of death, but for the most part, they're flagships, so to speak, that are supposed to represent the might of your empire. But the cool part is maybe they're going to tag that onto the fallen empires as well when they awaken, so that it's not completely cheese how they just keep spamming the dang things. So with the T-class weapons comes a new kind of defensive installation you can put it on called an ion cannon. That's going to be pretty cool because up until now defenses have been very bad. They are a 2 to 3 second stopgap. They don't actually do anything much. Where now you're able to concentrate your defenses in a way where you're able to zapify anything that's threatening you if you put enough effort into it, which is something that should have been in the game to begin with. That's the funny thing with Stellaris, is it's an evolving project, despite having been, quote, released. It's the same way with Crusader Kings and their other projects, is that they release their game and then they realize it can be done better, and so instead of sequelitis, they just figure, you know what, we'll bite the bullet and keep going DLC, because you are kind of buying the same game over and over again with another $20 to $30 injection. But that's kind of the point, is this has to be paid for somehow. There's a bottom line. Now, on to the actual main features that they list on their website, because all of this has been just what I've got from their dev diaries. So the actual features that they list is the Colossus Planet Killer weapon, which I told you about, Titan class ships, fortifications with massive orbital installations, Marauders. So pirates are getting a buff, I guess. Now, they're probably going to dev diary about Marauders pretty quick. But the key thing here is it's going to be kind of like Sins of a Solar Empire, I guess, where you're able to actually hire them as mercenaries. So I guess it's a new take on the Nomad ships. And like a few other games, they're able to get out of control. The pirates can band together. So some new non-violent features. New Ascension perks and civics. Cool. These are two things that should continually be added into the game. When it comes to strategy games, replayability. You have to have a lot of replayability in these kinds of games. Otherwise, you're not going to get people putting in 400 to 500 hours on a consecutive basis. You're always going to have those people that really care, but you want to get as many of them as you can. And what keeps me coming back to Stellaris is these promises of more and more content, and I'm hoping it's going to get to a point where I stay interested in the project, and I'm getting close to it, because I have been kind of holding out for something like this. Being able to blow up planets, it's one of those things that is what I always say when these things finally get put in, which is these are sci-fi tropes that people have been asking for the entire time, because Stellaris has proven to be a sort of love letter to that. Is Stellaris occurs in this super science fiction paradise in the space future, and it is up to the actors to determine what happens. And it's so interesting to me, like how every game of Stellaris plays out dramatically differently at times, depending on what settings are put in and what happens. New Unity ambitions. I don't know what that means. I'm assuming that has something to do with one of those civics that changes how the game works. Or they're making it so you're able to customize your Unity trees. I don't know. Maybe. And 3 new musical pieces. Whatever. Is there a price on this? $20. Wait. $20. Not bad. Not bad at all. I'd pay it. Well, I'd pay it. I will pay it. So, moving on. The Cyberpunk Cult RTS Relegion announced. Relegion. I already love it. So, you're the prophet of a dystopian cult where you're trying to fulfill your holy mission against corporations and unbelievers. And I can essentially sum this up to, what if Left Behind Eternal Forces was designed to be a good game instead of a propaganda game meant to convince people that Left Behind was a good book series when it wasn't? No, I'm serious. Left Behind was a horrible game. I'm pretty sure you're still able to find it for free. Like, I remember I got it for free in like a giveaway they were doing, and Left Behind had like 3 different sequels or something like that, and it was really just the same game but with a couple more features and like a little more story. So what cracked me up with Left Behind was the 3rd game, which introduced, quote, the atheists, which is the military, and they not only do not use the silly conversion mechanic, but they just shoot everyone. And I just thought it was just so hilarious how this game originally came out and people were criticizing it for being too violent. And there was even this rumor that they were gonna switch things out with guns with slingshots or something stupid like that. Like I just oh man. Now on to probably the best spiritual successor of all time. You are just like Left Behind, you're able to use spiritual mechanics in order to convince citizens to become your followers. And from the looks of things, you're able to upgrade them and turn them into different professions and promote them, and you're able to get special units, and there's a hacking mechanic to take control of territory. I am very excited. I really hope this game makes it onto Steam, because it will. I'll probably get my hands on it regardless, because I like to support that kind of thing. But I'm excited for Relegion. More cyberpunk games need to exist. More good ones with that take control of the setting. Like, this is a game that takes control of the setting. You do stuff in this setting. You're converting people and hijacking cameras and New World Order and shit. I'm very interested in that. Right on. So, Forged Battalions is coming to early access this week, on the 16th. And this is the spiritual successor to the failed End of Nations project. So, that was also developed by Petroglyph, and End of Nations is a hilarious story of a game that was always billed to be so much more than it actually was. In End of Nations, you were a commander who could level up, and originally you just formed a squad of units, and what would inevitably happen is you would get beaten very hard by a different combination of units, or someone would figure out how to micromanage correctly, and the game suffered intensely. This is why battle battalions blinked into existence. Both of those games learned that kind of playstyle does not work. And then End of Nations came back later with a hero unit mechanic. And the hero mechanic unit didn't really work out either, because the units completely took a back seat to it at that point. And what's funny is this existed when I was writing articles on Destructoid, and they sent me a fake cease and desist over making fun of their game, and I just to this day think it's so entertaining that they thought some Yahoo on Destructoid was capable of demolishing them when they were very clearly capable of doing so themselves. But on to this game, which appears to be a step in the right direction, because instead of whoever they were teaming up with last time, this is actually being published by Team 17, the Worms guys. So they know how to do strategy titles. And it appears that you build a giant old base and you churn out units. And it's kind of like a combination of Command and Conquer and Earth 2160. Because you got the Command and Conquer base building, and you build up your base and all of that. And I say 2160 because you get to customize your units and build different combinations depending on what you have available. And so the focus here is on unit combinations, and there are different chassis you get access to. And the big change here is this is more of a buy-to-play game. It's probably going to be a buy-to-play title, because the multiplayer seems to be purely skirmish. And we're seeing something akin to the failed Call of Duty RTS thing, or the Call of Duty like MMO, which was really just a free Call of Duty game. It was really awkward, and so I think the skirmishes do count towards your XP and upgrading your faction. I don't know. We will see in a few days. And I'm excited for 2018 already, because there are a lot of strategy games that are being announced, that are getting announcements, that are getting dates, that are getting exposure, and that makes me very happy, because up until 2018 there's been incessant talk about the next shooter, the next gory trench simulator, the next World War II simulator. Which, by the way, Call of Duty World War II, I thought they made that game. It was called Call of Duty. It was just the same game made over and over and over again until they finally decided to just rewind it. I'd like to think that we're finally starting to get tired of that, and we want more interesting content. That's something that VR brought with it, is the desire for interesting content, because we very quickly realized that VR on its own is kind of boring. So you have to make something that entertains you through it. For that, I'm pretty damn interested in Forged Battalions, because this is more of the kind of strategy game that I feel that is going to engage people. So, on to an answer that nobody wanted. Why should you never split the party, by IQBot42? My question might be stupid, but I've let parties split as a DM, and I've rolled with it as a PC. Nothing terrible happened usually. Is it mostly for stumbling upon a powerful mini-boss without help? I've never been clear on that, and pretty much everyone is adamant after playing a few games that splitting the party is a travesty and will ruin things for everyone. Yes, no, maybe so. As a few of the comments down here are going to point out, it's more of a guideline than actual rule. See, the thinking behind never splitting the party, the thinking behind that is that the DM may or may not be playing on a rigid adventure or with a rigid thought in mind, because in a dungeon you usually have to plan a door or two ahead, and if you have an adventure in your head, if you have an encounter in your head and all of a sudden the party splits, then you're throwing them for a loop. And so, ironically, this is usually done by weaker parties that aren't actually capable of handling it at that time. Because later on in the game, when you're level 7, you're able to fight a handful of creatures by yourself because you're strong enough. But you can't do that when you're really low level. That's when you need strength in numbers. So it's this weird catch-22 where by the time you're actually able to safely do it, you've been convinced you should never do it. And that's a blessing in disguise, because you don't want to get used to splitting your party for a couple of reasons. One, it slows down the game, and you preferably don't want to slow down the game if you can help it. If you can find a way to speed up that process, then there you go. You figured out something that works for you. And there are ways to successfully split the party. Like think of the Gears of War level design when they split their party. Is they'll do something like they'll put people in a train of mining carts, or they'll put them on the opposite sides of a wall where they can shoot through the wall to help each other, or an overseeing ledge. Or you get the idea that that the party is physically in different places, but they're not technically split because they're still able to protect each other in some fashion. And that is ideally the way you would do it to keep everyone involved, because that's the fear, is that if we split the party, if we purposefully tell a player that they're not allowed to do anything, then we are doing them a disservice as a storyteller, because we want everyone to be in on the story, which is why I always want to convince people to act more, and don't be afraid to push the dungeon master aside for a moment if it means getting a little more story in or a little more action in. You want that. So I would not say that it's a hard and fast rule to never split the party. I would just say that do it at your own risk. You need to know what you're doing. You need to fail at it a few times if you have to, because it's all about doing it right. And the thing is it's like any other cinematic trick. You don't want to rely on it. You want to mix things up. You never want to use a gimmick as your new normal, because it's going to detract from the experience after a while. That's the theory, anyway. So that's that question, and that's the show. Thank you for watching.